They called him the King of Wall Street. Grant Emerson thought he built an empire with his own two hands. He thought his wife Vivian was just a trophy, a quiet woman who spent too much money on gardening and charity. He was wrong. Dead wrong. When Grant served her divorce papers to run off with his young secretary, he thought he was cutting loose dead weight. He didn't know that every dollar in his bank account, every contract, and every breath his company took was authorized by a ghost. And that ghost was the woman sleeping right next to him. Watch closely, because when the queen decides to stop playing nice, the king doesn't just lose his crown, he loses his head. The champagne in the crystal flute was vintage 1998 Dom Perignon, but to Vivian Emerson, it tasted like battery acid. She stood near the velvet ropes of the Grand Ballroom at the Pierre Hotel in New York City, smoothing the invisible wrinkles on her emerald silk gown. The room was suffocatingly warm, filled with the scent of expensive cologne, roasted duck, and the distinct metallic smell of ambition. On the stage, bathed in a spotlight that seemed to worship him, stood her husband, Grant Emerson. True innovation, Grant bellowed into the microphone, his voice dripping with the charisma that had charmed investors for a decade, is not about waiting for opportunities. It is about seizing them by the throat. The crowd erupted in applause. Men in $5,000 suits nodded vigorously. Grant flashed his signature smile, the one that had graced the cover of Forbes and Fortune 3 times in the last 2 years. He held the Tech Visionary of the Decade Award, aloft, the heavy glass catching the light. I built Ethereum Dynamics from a garage in Jersey. Grant continued, his eyes scanning the room, but sliding right past Vivian. I coded the first algorithm. I negotiated the first buyout. I made the hard calls when everyone else was too scared to move. Vivian took a slow sip of her champagne. You couldn't even code a toaster to pop up toast. She thought, her face remaining a mask of polite adoration. A young waiter passed by with a tray of Arurvis. Vivian stopped him, not for food, but to check the time on the discreet Patek Philippe watch on her wrist. 8:42 p.m. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She didn't need to look to know who it was. It was likely Arthur Penhaligon, the senior partner at the Kensington Strategy Group, a firm that officially didn't exist on public records, but essentially owned half the intellectual property in Silicon Valley. She slid the phone out, shielding the screen. Message from Arthur. Arthur, the Japanese merger is stalling. They want reassurance on the lithium supply chain. Grant is ignoring their emails. Vivian sighed. Of course Grant was ignoring them. Grant didn't understand supply chains. He understood photo ops and shaking hands. He thought the lithium deal was boring logistics. She typed back rapidly. Tell Yamamoto that Protocol FI guarantees the shipment from the Nevada subsidiary by Q3. Offer a 2% discount on the back end if they sign tonight. Do it under the silent partner authorization. She slid the phone back into her purse just as the applause died down. Grant was descending from the stage, swarmed by admirers. Grant, incredible speech. Grant, about that eye. Vivian watched him approach. He looked flushed with victory. He stopped in front of her, his eyes glassy with adrenaline and expensive scotch. Did you hear that, Viv? Viv, he asked, loosening his tie slightly. They ate it up. The stock is going to jump 10 points tomorrow morning. It was wonderful, Grant, Vivian said, her voice soft, practiced. You looked very commanding. He patted her cheek, a gesture that felt more like he was petting a well-behaved dog than touching his wife of 12 years. Try to look a little more alive, darling. You're standing there like a funeral arrangement. This is the biggest night of my life. I'm just tired, Grant. The charity auction took a lot out of me. He rolled his eyes. Right. The charity, spending my money to save. What is it this week? One-eyed cats. Libraries for underprivileged schools, she corrected quietly. Whatever, just smile. The photographer from Vanity Fair is coming over. As the camera flashed, blinding them both, Vivian felt a hand on her lower back. It wasn't Grant's. It was too low, too familiar. She turned slightly to see Sienna Cross, Ethereum's new chief marketing officer, standing uncomfortably close to the couple. Sienna was 24, brilliant in a cutthroat sort of way, and wearing a dress that cost more than Vivian's first car. Congratulations, Mr. Emerson, Sienna purred, ignoring Vivian and Trilly. And Mrs. Emerson, lovely dress, very traditional. Thank you, Sienna, Vivian said, her tone cool. Grant, the investors from Dubai are waiting in the VIP lounge, Sienna said, touching Grant's arm. Her fingers lingered on his bicep for a second too long. They're dying to buy you a drink. Grant turned to Vivian, his expression dismissing her before he even spoke. Go home, Viv. This is business. You'll just be bored. I can wait, Vivian said. Don't be clingy. Grant snapped low enough that the photographer couldn't hear. Take the driver. I'll be late. Vivian watched them walk away. She saw the way Sienna leaned into him, the way Grant's hand hovered near her waist. She wasn't blind. She had known about Sienna for 3 months, just like she had known about the paralegal 2 years ago, and the PR consultant before that. She walked out of the ballroom, the cold New York air hitting her face as she stepped onto Fifth Avenue. The black town car was waiting. Home, Mrs. Emerson, the driver, an older man named Roberts, asked as he opened the door. Vivian paused, looking back at the golden glow of the hotel where her husband was celebrating a fortune he believed he owned. No, Roberts, she said, her voice changing. The softness was gone. The submissive wife tone vanished, replaced by the steel of a woman who ran billion-dollar negotiations via text message. Take me to the office, the private office on 2nd Street. Roberts nodded, not surprised. He was the only one on Grant's payroll who knew who actually signed the checks. Yes, ma'am. 3 weeks later, the blow finally came. It was a Tuesday morning. Vivian was in the sunroom of their Hamptons estate, trimming bonsai trees. It was a meditative practice she used to keep her rage from boiling over. Grant walked in. He wasn't wearing his usual suit. He was wearing casual golf attire, but his face was tight, serious. He held a manila envelope in his hand. Vivian, he said, not wasting time on a greeting. Put the scissors down. We need to talk. Vivian snipped a small branch. I'm listening. He threw the envelope onto the glass table. It landed with a heavy slap. I want a divorce. Vivian didn't flinch. She carefully placed the shears on the table and wiped her hands on a cloth. She looked at the envelope, then at him. Is it Sienna? She asked calmly. Grant scoffed, pacing the room. It's not about another woman, Vivian. It's about us. I've outgrown this. I've outgrown you. Look at you. You're content pruning tiny trees while I'm changing the world. I need a partner who matches my ambition. Someone who understands the velocity of my life. Velocity, Vivian repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Don't make this difficult, Grant said, his voice hardening. I've had my lawyers draw this up. It's generous considering. Vivian opened the envelope. She scanned the document. It was brutal. He was offering her the beach house, a monthly stipend of $15,000 for 5 years, and she would have to sign an NDA regarding all company matters. In exchange, she would relinquish all claims to Ethereum Dynamics, stock the Manhattan penthouse and the offshore accounts. You're citing the prenup we signed 12 years ago, Vivian noted. Ironclad, Grant said smugly. You signed it, Vivian. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. Back then, you were a broke art student, and I was a rising star. You have no claim to the empire I built. Vivian looked up. You built? Yes, I built, Grant shouted, his face turning red. I worked 18-hour days. I charmed the investors. I took the risks. You took the credit, Vivian said softly. Excuse me. Vivian stood up. Who fixed the code for the Orion interface in 2018 when your engineering team was ready to quit? Who renegotiated the debt with the Swiss banks when you over-leveraged us in 2020? Who told you to buy into AI chips 3 years before anyone else even knew what they were? Grant laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. You think because I vented to you in bed and you gave some cute little suggestions that you're the reason for my success? You're delusional, Viv. You're a muse at best. A sounding board, not a CEO. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of coffee and arrogance. Sign the papers, Vivian. If you fight me, I will bury you in legal fees until you're selling these little trees on the side of the road. I have the best lawyers in the city. I have the press. I have the money. Vivian looked at him. For the first time in years, she felt a genuine emotion toward him. It wasn't love, and it wasn't hate. It was pity. You really believe that, don't you? She whispered. I know it, he said. You have 48 hours to sign. I'm moving Sienna into the penthouse on Friday. I want you out by then. He turned and walked out of the sunroom, slamming the door so hard the glass panes rattled. Vivian stood in the silence for a long minute. She picked up the divorce papers and walked over to the shredder in the corner of the room. She fed the document into the machine, watching Grant's ironclad offer turn into confetti. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in a long time. "Arthur," she said when the line clicked open. "Vivian," the lawyer's voice was sharp. "Is it time?" "It's time," she said. "Initiate the dead man switch protocol on Ethereum servers. Freeze the Cayman assets." And Arthur, yes, call the board of directors. Tell them the silent partner is calling an emergency meeting. "Mandatory attendance in Grant?" Arthur asked. Vivian looked out the window at Grant, who was currently yelling at the gardener about the height of the hedges. "Don't tell him a thing," she said coldly. "Let him enjoy his last 48 hours as a rich man." The morning after the divorce demand, Grant Emerson arrived at Athetheron Dynamics. Feeling invincible, the sun was bouncing off the glass facade of the 40-story building he believed was his kingdom. He whistled as he walked through the lobby, ignoring the security guard, Ralph, who had greeted him every morning for 8 years. Grant didn't have time for greetings. He was a single man now, or close enough to it, and the world was his oyster. He stepped into the private elevator, checking his reflection in the mirrored walls. He looked good. No, he looked expensive. When the doors slid open on the executive floor, Sienna Cross was already there. She was sitting at his assistant's desk, a power move displacing his actual assistant, Mrs. Higgins, who was currently relegated, to a folding chair in the hallway, sorting mail. "Good morning, Sienna smirked, spinning in the chair. "I ordered the new furniture for the office, the Italian leather set. It cost $40,000, but I put it on the company black card." Grant chuckled, leaning over to kiss her. "You have expensive taste. I like that. It matches mine. Did you call the real estate agent about the Tribeca loft?" "I did," Sienna said, her face falling slightly. "But there was a weird issue. The deposit didn't go through. The agent said the account was frozen for audit." Grant frowned, straightening his tie. "That's ridiculous. It's probably just the bank being overcautious because of the wire size. I'll call David Mercer in finance." He walked into his office, a sprawling glass box overlooking the Hudson River. He sat down at his massive oak desk and tapped his keyboard to wake up his terminal. He needed to authorize the transfer personally. The screen flickered. Instead of his usual dashboard showing stock tickers and global operations, a simple black screen appeared with a single blinking cursor. "System alert. Biometric mismatch." "What the hell?" Grant muttered. He pressed his thumb against the scanner again. "Access denied." "Sienna," he shouted. "Get it on the phone. The system is glitching again." 10 minutes later, the IT director, a nervous man named Kevin, rushed in, sweating through his shirt. "Fix it, Kevin," Grant snapped. "I have a merger to close with the Ravenies at noon, and I can't even get into my email." Kevin typed furiously on Grant's keyboard. I, I don't understand, Mr. Emerson. It says your admin privileges have been revoked." "Revoked? I own the damn company. Who could revoke me?" "It says the command came from the root user, sir. The architect profile." Grant froze. The architect profile. That was the original coding profile used when the company was founded. He hadn't used that login in 10 years. In fact, he couldn't even remember the password. "Override it," Grant ordered. "I can't," Kevin whispered, terrified. "The architect profile has God mode clearance. It overrides everything, even the CEO." Grant shoved Kevin out of the chair. "Useless. Get out. Send Mercer in here." David Mercer, the CFO, arrived looking pale. He didn't wait for Grant to speak. "Grant, we have a problem," Mercer said, closing the door and locking it. "A big problem. The Cayman accounts used for the operational slush fund empty." Grant stood up so fast his chair toppled over. "What do you mean empty? There was $12 million in there yesterday. It was moved at 9:00 a.m. this morning," Mercer said, holding up a tablet. "Transferred to a holding trust called Nemesis Ventures. And it gets worse. The servers in the Nevada warehouse, the ones mining the new crypto protocol, they shut down an hour ago. Remote kill switch." "Who is doing this?" Grant roared, his face turning purple. "Is it a hack? Are the Russians attacking us?" "It's not a hack, Grant," Mercer said, his voice trembling. The authorization codes is used to move the money and kill the servers. They were valid. They were signed with a digital key that hasn't been used since 2015. Grant paced the room, his mind racing. 2015, the year the company went public. The year they restructured the assets to protect them from a lawsuit regarding a faulty battery prototype. He remembered that year vividly. He had been too busy drinking with potential investors to deal with the paperwork. He had told his wife, Vivian. He stopped pacing. No, he whispered. She doesn't know how to do this. She plants hydrangeas. She doesn't know digital encryption keys. But a cold seed of doubt began to sprout in his stomach. He remembered the nights in 2015. He would come home drunk, complaining about the lawyers, about the complexity of the asset protection structures. Vivian would sit there with a pot of tea listening. Why don't you put the core IP into a separate trust, Grant? She had suggested one night. That way, if the company gets sued, they can't take the technology. I can set up the paperwork for you. I took that paralegal course online, remember? He had laughed at her paralegal course, but had signed the papers she put in front of him because he was hungover and late for golf. He hadn't even read them. Grant grabbed his phone and dialed Vivian. It went straight to voicemail. You've reached Vivian. I'm currently busy pruning dead branches from my life. Leave a message. Grant threw the phone against the wall. It shattered a spiderweb of cracks, obliterating the screen. Sienna poked her head in the door, looking annoyed rather than concerned. Grant, the car dealership just called. They said the lease on the Aston Martin has been terminated. They're coming to tow it in an hour. This is embarrassing. Fix it. Grant looked at his mistress, the woman he had blown up his marriage for. She didn't care about the company. She didn't care about the stress. She just wanted the car. Get out, Sienna, Grant growled. Excuse me, I said. Get out. Go to your office and shut up. Sienna's eyes widened. She had never seen him like this. She slammed the door, leaving him alone in the silence of his glass cage. The intercom on his desk buzzed. It was Mrs. Higgins, his old assistant. Mr. Emerson. What now? Grant barked at the speaker. You have a visitor, Mr. Penethalagan. Grant's blood ran cold. Arthur Penhaligon wasn't just a lawyer. He was a shark in a three-piece suit. He was the corporate counsel for the board of directors, not Grant personally. Send him in. Arthur walked in carrying a thin leather briefcase. He didn't sit down. He stood in the center of the room, looking at the toppled chair and the broken phone. Rough morning, Grant? Arthur asked dryly. Someone is sabotaging my company. Arthur, I want a full investigation. I want the FBI involved. That won't be necessary, Arthur said. I'm here to inform you that an emergency board meeting has been called for 2:00 p.m. today. I didn't call a meeting, Grant said. As chairman, only I can call a meeting. Actually, Arthur corrected, according to Article 7, Section C of the company, by laws, a meeting can be called by any shareholder possessing more than 51% of the voting rights. I own 51% of the stock, Grant shouted. I am the majority shareholder. Arthur smiled. It was a terrifying, thin-lipped smile. Are you? You might want to check the shareholder registry, Grant. You own 51% of the Class B common stock. The Class A preferred stock, which carries 10 votes per share, is held by a separate entity. What entity? What entity? Grant demanded. I never issued Class A stock. You did? Arthur said 10 years ago to the Vanguard Trust. You signed the issuance yourself. Grant felt the room spinning. He vaguely remembered it. A tax loophole, a way to avoid capital gains. He had signed whatever was put in front of him. And who controls the Vanguard Trust? Grant asked, his voice barely a whisper. Arthur checked his watch. You'll find out at 2 hets. Don't be late. The boardroom of Athatheron Dynamics was a masterpiece of intimidation. A 40-foot table made of black walnut floor to ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline and leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars. Grant sat at the head of the table, sweating. He had tried to compose himself, putting on a fresh shirt and drinking 3 espressos, but his hands were shaking. Around the table sat the board of directors. There was fat old Jenkins from the banking sector, Lydia Vance, no relation to the forbidden Vance, the Techs, and a few others. They all looked at Grant with a mixture of confusion and pity. Sienna had insisted on coming in, sitting in the corner on a side chair, clutching her Prada bag. She looked nervous. She could smell the blood in the water. Let's get this over with, Grant said, projecting a confidence he didn't feel. I don't know who called this meeting or what kind of clerical error led to the system lockout this morning, but rest assured heads will roll. The meeting hasn't started yet, Grant, Jenkins grumbled. We're waiting for the majority shareholder. I am the majority shareholder. Grant slammed his fist on the table. Stop playing games, Jenkins. Who is this Vanguard Trust? Is it a hostile takeover? Is it Musk Bezos? The double doors at the far end of the room opened with a heavy thud. The room went silent. Click, click, click. The sound of sharp heels on the marble floor echoed like gunshots. Grant turned, ready to scream at the intruder. The words died in his throat. Vivian walked in, but it wasn't the Vivian he knew. The woman who wore floral prints and cardigans, who spent her days organizing charity luncheons and tending to her garden, was gone. This woman was wearing a tailored white pantsuit that looked like it had been cut from a cloud and sharpened with a razor blade. Her hair, usually worn in a loose bun, was slicked back, sharp and modern. Her makeup was fierce red lips, smoky eyes. She looked like a predator. She didn't look at Grant. She walked straight to the other end of the table, the end usually reserved for the vice chairman. Sorry I'm late, Vivian said. Her voice wasn't soft. It was resonant, commanding. The traffic coming from the divorce attorney's office was murder. Vivian, Grant sputtered half standing. What are you doing here? This is a closed board meeting. Get out. Roberts is downstairs. He can take you home. Vivian finally looked at him. Her eyes were cold, hard chips of flint. Sit down, Grant, she said. Don't tell me what to do. Grant yelled, Security, get her out of here. Two security guards stepped forward from the back of the room. Grant pointed at Vivian. Remove her. The guards didn't move. They looked at Vivian. Vivian gave a subtle nod. The guards stepped back against the wall, crossing their arms. They work for the company, Grant, Vivian said smoothly, and the company pays them, which means effectively I pay them. You. Grant laughed nervously, looking around the table for support. Guys, this is my wife. She's having a breakdown. She thinks she runs the place. Mr. Penhaligon, Vivian said, ignoring her husband. Please read the structure of the Vanguard Trust for the board. Arthur Penhaligon stood up. He adjusted his glasses. The Vanguard Trust was established in 2015. Arthur read, It holds 100% of the intellectual property of Ethereum Dynamics, including all patents, trademarks, and software code. It also holds 60% of the voting stock of the parent company. The sole beneficiary and trustee of the Vanguard Trust is Mrs. Vivian Emerson. The room gasped. Sienna in the corner dropped her purse. Grant fell back into his chair. That's impossible. I signed that trust over to a blind third party. You signed it over to VE Holdings, Vivian corrected. You assumed VE stood for Virtual Enterprise or some other nonsense you didn't bother to check. It stands for Vivian Emerson. She walked slowly toward him, trailing a hand along the edge of the table. You were so busy being the face of the company, Grant. So busy giving speeches, taking photos, and chasing skirts. Her eyes flicked briefly to Sienna, who shrank back into her chair. You forgot who actually did the work. You forgot who stayed up until 400 a.m. debugging the launch code in 2019 while you were in Carbo. You forgot who structured the debt. You built the image, Grant. I built the engine. This is fraud. Grant stammered. I'll sue you. You'll what? Vivian interrupted, leaning over the table, her face inches from his. You have no money. I froze your personal accounts this morning because they are tied to company credit lines. You have no car. You have no house. The deed to the Hamptons estate is in the trust's name. You don't even have a job. She stood up straight and looked at the board. I'm calling for a motion, Vivian announced. A vote of no confidence in the current CEO, Grant Emerson, and a motion to remove him immediately for gross negligence and misappropriation of company funds. Seconded, Jenkins said, immediately raising his hand. Seconded, Lydia said, not even looking at Grant. All in favor? Isfahidi, Vivian asked. Every hand in the room went up. Even Grant's ally, David Mercer, slowly raised his hand, looking down at the table. Vivian smiled. It was a terrifyingly beautiful smile. Motion carried. Grant, you're fired. Grant sat there, stunned. The silence in the room was deafening. He looked at Sienna, hoping for some kind of support, some kind of loyalty. Sienna stood up. She looked at Grant, then at Vivian. She saw the power dynamic shift in real time. She picked up her bag. I, I think I should go, Sienna said. Sit down, Miss Cross, Vivian said sharply. We haven't discussed your corporate card expenses yet. The $40,000 for furniture. I hope you kept the receipt because the company isn't paying for it. You are. Vivian turned back to Grant, her eyes blazing. You wanted a divorce, Grant. You wanted to trade me in for a newer model because I didn't match your ambition. Well, here I am. Am I ambitious enough for you now? Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was the king of Wall Street, stripping naked in front of his court. And the executioner was the woman he had underestimated for a decade. Security, Vivian said, her voice bored. Escort Mr. Emerson out of the building and take his badge. He doesn't work here anymore. The walk from the elevator to the revolving doors of the lobby felt like a funeral march, except there were no mourners, only spectators. Grant Emerson, the man who had been featured on Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People list, was being escorted out of his own building by two security guards he didn't even recognize. He clutched a cardboard box containing a stapler, a stress ball, and a framed photo of himself shaking hands with the president, a photo that now seemed like a relic from a lost civilization. Behind him, Sienna Cross clicked along in her heels, dragging her Louis Vuitton luggage. She wasn't being escorted, but she was fleeing. The eyes of the reception staff, the interns, and the janitorial crew were all fixed on them. This is a mistake, Grant muttered to the guard on his left. You know who I am. I'm going to have your badge for this. The guard didn't even blink. Step this way, sir. They were shoved out into the sidewalk of 42nd Street. The humid city air hit them instantly. The glass doors swooshed shut behind them, sealing off the air-conditioned empire Grant had ruled only an hour ago. Grant spun around, staring at the towering glass structure. He reached for his pocket to grab his phone, intending to call his lawyer again, but remembered his phone was smashed in pieces on the floor of the executive suite. Grant! Sienna shrieked. She was standing by the curb, frantically tapping on her phone. My cards are declined, all of them, even my personal savings account. Keep your voice down, Grant hissed, looking around for paparazzi. I will not keep it down, she yelled, attracting the attention of a hot dog vendor. I tried to call an Uber, and the app says payment method invalid. I checked my bank app, and it says assets frozen pending internal audit. Grant, what did she do? She locked us out, Grant said, rubbing his temples. Vivian controls the accounts. She must have flagged you as an accomplice to financial fraud. Accomplice. Sienna's face went pale, her vanity replaced by genuine terror. I didn't do anything. I just spent the money you gave me. You put 40 grand of furniture on a company card, Sienna. Technically, that's embezzlement if the CEO doesn't authorize it. And apparently, I'm not the CEO anymore. Sienna stared at him. The admiration, the lust, the calculated affection, it all evaporated in a split second, replaced by pure, unfiltered disgust. You're useless, she spat. Excuse me, you told me you were the genius, she hissed, stepping closer, her finger jabbing into his chest. You told me she was a nobody, a housewife. You lied. You were just a pretty face in a suit, and now you're a broke pretty face. Sienna, baby, listen, don't baby me. I have rent due on my apartment in West Chelsea, and if I can't access my accounts, I'm going to be evicted. She looked at his cardboard box. Fix this, Grant. Fix it now. I can't right now. I need a few days to rally my allies. We can go to the Hamptons house, lay low. You don't have a Hamptons house, she screamed. She took it. You have nothing. God, I wasted 6 months on you. She flagged down a yellow taxi. She opened the door, threw her bag in, and looked back at him one last time. Where are you going? Grant asked, panic rising in his chest. You can't pay for that. I'm going to my ex-boyfriend's place, she said coldly. He's a dentist. He's boring, but at least he actually owns his own practice. She slammed the door. The taxi sped off, merging into the sea of yellow and black, leaving Grant Emerson standing alone on the sidewalk with a cardboard box. It started to rain. Grant walked 4 blocks to the nearest ATM. He inserted his black titanium card. Transaction denied, card retained. The machine swallowed his card. He tried his backup card. Transaction denied, card retained. He had $40 in cash in his wallet. That was it. He walked to a nearby bar, a dive place he would never have set foot in normally. He ordered a cheap whiskey and sat in the back staring at the TV mounted in the corner. The news was on. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Shocking ouster at Ethereum Dynamics, Grant Emerson fired amid fraud allegations." The screen showed footage of Vivian leaving the building. She looked impeccable, wearing oversized sunglasses, ignoring the press as she stepped into his limousine. A reporter's voiceover played in a stunning turn of events. The reclusive Vivian Emerson has stepped in as interim CEO. Sources say she has uncovered years of financial mismanagement by her estranged husband. Ethereum stock has actually rallied 4% on the news. Grant downed the whiskey. It burned, but not as much as the headline. The market liked that he was gone. The world preferred her. He pulled out a crumpled napkin and borrowed a pen from the bartender. He began to make a list of people who owed him favors. 1. Jonathan Bryce, hedge fund manager. I saved him from the SEC in 19. 2. Senator Corcoran. I donated $2 million to his campaign. 3. Donovan Pike, my biggest rival. But he hates Vivian. He walked to the payphone near the restrooms. He didn't even own a cell phone anymore and dialed Jonathan Bryce's private number. "Hello, Jonathan, it's Grant." Click. The line went dead. He dialed Senator Corcoran. "Senator's office. Put him on." "It's Grant Emerson." "I'm sorry, Mr. Emerson. The senator is in a meeting indefinitely." Grant slammed the receiver against the wall. He was radioactive. Vivian hadn't just fired him. She had excommunicated him from the social elite. He looked at the third name on the list, Donovan Pike, the CEO of Quantico Systems. Grant had stolen 3 contracts from Pike over the years, and they had a public feud. But Pike was a shark, and sharks liked blood. If Grant couldn't get a help from friends, maybe he could sell a weapon to an enemy. Grant used his last few quarters to dial Pike's office. He used an old bypass code to get through to the direct line. "Pike speaking. It's Emerson." Silence, then a low chuckle. "I saw the news Grant sleeping on a park bench tonight." "I have something you want, Donovan," Grant said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The Project Chimera source code, the AI algorithm that Athetherian is about to launch. It's worth billions. And why would you give that to me?" "Because I want to burn her down," Grant said, his eyes staring at his reflection in the greasy mirror of the phone booth. "I want to watch Vivian lose everything. I'll give you the drive for $5 million, cash, and a flight to Zurich." "I'm listening," Pike said. "Meet me at the Navy Yard midnight. Come alone. And Grant, if you're wasting my time, I'll throw you in the river." Midnight at the Brooklyn Navy Yard was desolate. The skeletal cranes of the old shipyards loomed against the dark sky like prehistoric beasts. The rain had turned into a steady, freezing drizzle. Grant shivered in his wetsuit jacket. He had nowhere to go, so he had spent the last 6 hours sitting in a 24-hour diner, nursing a single cup of kivi until the waitress kicked him out. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly toward him, its tires crunching on the gravel. The window rolled down. Donovan Pike sat in the back smoking a cigar. "You look like hell, Grant," Pike said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Cut the pleasantries," Grant snapped. "Do we have a deal?" "If the goods are real," Pike said. "Where's the code?" "I don't have it on me," Grant said. "It's on a secure hard drive, an air-gapped backup. Vivian is smart. She locked me out of the cloud servers, but she forgot about the physical backups." "Where are they?" "In the panic room of our estate in the Hamptons, the Seacliff Manor." Pike raised an eyebrow. "The house she kicked you out of the house that undoubtedly has a state-of-the-art alarm system." "I installed that system," Grant lied. "I know the bypass codes. She wouldn't have changed the hard wiring yet. She's too focused on the corporate audit. I can get in, get the drive, and get out before security even blinks." Pike studied him for a long moment. He saw the desperation in Grant's eyes, the hunger of a man who had fallen from the top of the mountain and was willing to do anything to climb back up. "Fine," Pike said. "I'll have a team drop you off near the perimeter. You go in alone. You bring me the drive. I verify the data. Then you get your money." "I need an advance," Grant said. $5,000 for expenses. Pike laughed and flicked a stack of $100 bills out the window. It landed in a puddle at Grant's feet. Don't disappoint me, Grant. 3 hours later, Grant was crouching in the shrubbery outside the Seacliff estate. The house was dark. The massive limestone structure looked like a fortress. Grant knew every inch of this place. He had bought it to impress his friends, though Vivian was the one who made it a home. He crept toward the side entrance near the kitchen. He approached the keypad, 1985, his birth year. He punched it in. The light blinked red. Access denied. He cursed under his breath. She had changed it. He tried her birthday. '06, Usanet 2, red light. He tried their anniversary. 1 red light. Think, Grant. Think, he whispered, wiping rain from his eyes. What code would she use? Something she cares about. Something I don't know. He remembered something she had said during their argument years ago. You don't even know the name of the first dog we rescued together. Barnaby. He converted the letters to numbers on the keypad. 27, 6, 22. 2. The light blinked green. A soft click echoed. Grant almost laughed out loud. Sentimental fool. Even in her victory, she was predictable. He slipped inside. The house was silent, smelling of lavender and floor wax. He moved through the shadows, avoiding the motion sensors in the main hallway by sticking to the servants' corridors. He reached the library. The panic room was hidden behind a false bookshelf. He pressed the hidden latch. The shelf swung open. Inside the panic room, the air was stale. A row of secure servers hummed along the wall, but Grant wasn't interested in those. He went to the floor, safe in the corner. He spun the dial. This combination he knew for a fact Vivian couldn't change without a locksmith, and she hadn't had time for that. Left 40, right 10, left 25. The safe clicked open. Inside lay a single silver external hard drive labeled Project Chimera, Master Backup. Gotcha, Grant whispered. He grabbed the drive, his heart pounding against his ribs. This was his ticket back. With $5 million from Pike, he could start over. He could flee to Brazil or Thailand. He could disappear. He closed the safe and turned to leave. Suddenly, the lights in the library flooded on, blinding him. Grant froze. He squinted against the glare. Sitting in the high-backed leather armchair in the center of the room was Vivian. She was wearing a silk robe, sipping a cup of tea. She didn't look surprised. She looked like she had been waiting. Standing behind her were two men, not private security. These men wore blue windbreakers with yellow letters on the back. FBI. Hello, Grant, Vivian said calmly. I was wondering how long it would take you to figure out the password. I almost made it. Grant is an idiot, but I thought that was too long. Vivian, Grant stammered, clutching the hard drive to his chest. I just came to get some personal effects. Is that what you call a Class A trade secret? One of the FBI agents stepped forward. Grant Emerson placed the drive on the floor and put your hands on your head. This is a setup, Grant yelled, backing away. She lured me here. This is my house. I have a right to be here. Actually, Vivian said, setting her tea down. You don't. The deed transfer was finalized yesterday morning. You were trespassing. And since you just removed a hard drive containing proprietary data valued at over $1 billion, you are also committing corporate espionage. You changed the code to something I could guess, Grant accused. You wanted me to come in. I knew you were desperate, Vivian said, standing up. I knew you went to Donovan Pike. We have the phone logs from the payphone, Grant, and we have Pike's testimony. We picked him up an hour ago, waiting outside the perimeter. Grant's knees buckled. Pike had flipped. Of course he had. Pike wasn't going to prison for a washed-up exal. Why? Grant whispered, looking at his wife, the woman he had ignored, cheated on, and dismissed for 12 years. Why go this far? You already took the company. You took the money. Why did you have to send me to jail? Vivian walked up to him. She stopped just outside of arm's reach. Because you didn't just break my heart, Grant, she said, her voice trembling with a rare flash of anger. You broke my spirit. You made me believe I was small so you could feel big. You took every idea I ever had and claimed it as your own. You erased me. She leaned in, her eyes hard as diamonds. But you forgot the most basic rule of engineering, Grant. You can only build so much pressure in a closed system before it explodes. She signaled the agents, "Get him out of my house." As the handcuffs clicked around Grant's wrists, the cold metal biting into his skin, he realized the cruelest twist of all. The hard drive in his hand, it felt too light. "It is empty, by the way," Vivian called out as they dragged him toward the door. "I wiped the physical backups yesterday." "You're going to prison for stealing a paperweight." Grant Emerson, the former king of Wall Street, was hauled out into the rain screaming. Vivian watched him go, then walked over to the keypad and punched in a new code. She locked the door. 8 months later, the landscape of New York's high society had shifted irrevocably. The trial of Grant Emerson had been the tabloid photo of the decade. The king of Wall Street had been reduced to a cautionary tale. His defense attorney, a public defender named Mr. Henderson, because Grant couldn't afford anyone else, had advised him to take a plea deal. The evidence was overwhelming: the attempted theft, the trespassing, the corporate espionage, and the trail of financial negligence Vivian's audit had uncovered. Grant was sentenced to 3 years in a minimum security facility in upstate New York. It wasn't hard time, but for a man like Grant, the loss of freedom was a fate worse than death. On a crisp October afternoon, inmate number 89 Force Row, Grant Emerson was assigned to his work duty, scrubbing the cafeteria tables. As he wiped a sticky stain of mystery sauce off the plastic surface, he looked up at the television mounted in the corner of the mess hall. It was tuned to SNBC. The headline flashed in bold letters: "Ethereum Dynamics surpasses Q4 earnings predictions. CEO Vivian Emerson named Innovator of the Year." Grant stopped scrubbing. There she was. Vivian looked radiant. She wasn't wearing the severe white suit from the boardroom takeover. She was wearing a soft, elegant navy dress, looking relaxed and genuinely happy. She was sitting opposite a famous news anchor, laughing. "Well, the truth is," Vivian was saying on the screen, "Ethereum was always a company with great potential, but it was being held back by an obsession with image over substance. Once we refocused on the core technology, specifically the lithium recycling protocols I developed in 2018, the growth happened naturally." "You developed those protocols?" the anchor asked, surprised. "I thought the previous administration claimed credit for that." Vivian smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, but conveyed a world of understanding. "The previous administration had a habit of claiming things they didn't build, but we prefer to look forward, not backward." Grant felt a bitter lump in his throat. The inmate next to him, a burly man named S., who was in for racketeering, nudged him. "Hey, 8940, ain't that your ex-wife?" Grant stared at the screen. "Yeah," he whispered. "She looks smart," Sal grunted. "And rich? You really blew that one, uh-huh." Grant didn't answer. He looked down at his rag, gray and tattered, and went back to scrubbing the table. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, the penthouse office of Ethereum Dynamics was buzzing. Vivian signed the final document for the acquisition of Pike's company, Quantico Systems. After Donovan Pike's arrest for conspiracy, his company's stock had tanked, and Vivian had swooped in like a hawk, buying her biggest competitor for pennies on the dollar. She handed the file to Arthur Penhaligon. "Done," she said. "We own the market now." "An elegant maneuver, Mrs. Emerson," Arthur said, tucking the file away. "By the way, I received a letter from the upstate facility. It's from Grant. He's asking for a visitation. Apparently, he wants to apologize." Vivian stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the city she now effectively ruled. She thought about the 12 years she had spent in the shadows, the years of making him coffee, fixing his mistakes, soothing his ego, and being told she was just a housewife. She thought about the apology. She knew what it really was. It was a maneuver, a hope that she would feel sorry for him, maybe send some money to his commissary account, or pull strings for an early release. Grant didn't know how to be sorry. He only knew how to be strategic. "Burn it," Vivian said, not turning around. "Burn the letter," Arthur asked, amped. "Burn it and block the number. I have a board meeting in 10 minutes, and I don't have time for ghosts." She picked up her purse. Inside was a small velvet box containing a key. It wasn't for a safe or a server room. It was the key to a small cottage in the countryside of Provence, France. She had bought it last week under her maiden name. She was planning a vacation, a real one. No galas, no investors, no husbands taking credit for her life. Just her bonsai trees, and the billions she had built with her own two hands. Vivian Emerson walked out of the office, and for the first time in her life, she didn't just feel powerful. She felt free. And that is the story of how the King of Wall Street lost his crown to the queen he ignored. It's a brutal reminder that in life and in marriage, you should never mistake silence for weakness or patience for stupidity. Grant Emerson thought he was the driver, but he never realized he was just a passenger in a car Vivian built.